Act 3, What Walks West. They buried the father beneath the marker stone at dawn. Ruth murmured prayers from memory, empty syllables into empty earth. Elian did not speak. The boy tamped dirt over the body, feeling the shape of each breath in his chest like broken glass. He took his father's musket, powder horn, and knife. Elian watched, eyes hollow, pistol in hand. Ruth's fingers touched the spiral cut into her chest, tracing it over and over as if it spoke in whispers only she could hear. They moved west, away from Eden, away from crossroads and the dead. The forest thickened. Trees grew close like conspirators, trunks gnarled and bent by winds that blew from nowhere. Birds did not sing here. No deer moved, no sound at all, save their footsteps in leaves. At midday, they found a farmhouse burning in silence, flames flickering without smoke. No bodies visible, only footprints that vanished abruptly. Ruth stared, lips parted, breath shallow. She pointed at the ground, at the prints that simply ended. They walked until they did not exist. They moved on. At nightfall, they reached a river swollen from rains. Its surface was black and smooth, reflecting no stars. A wooden ferry sat tethered on their side, waiting like a trap. Elian shook his head, but the boy stepped aboard without hesitation. Ruth followed, as though she had no choice. Elian stood silent on the bank, pistol shaking. "Across is death," he said. The boy looked at him, eyes sharp and older than his years. "Death is behind us, too." Elian hesitated, then stepped aboard. They crossed slowly, the river silent, the air thick and sour. Midway, Ruth began to sob quietly, shoulders shaking, hands gripping the boat's rail. She whispered something over and over. "We are food for what waits." When they reached the opposite bank, the boy felt something change. The trees stood like tombstones, trunks twisted into shapes of pain. Shadows moved on their own. A faint humming filled his ears, endless and maddening. They camped without fire beneath an overhang of rock. Elian stood watch, eyes darting at every shadow. Ruth fell into restless sleep, her whispers fading into faint moans. The boy dreamt vividly, violently, of faces he did not know, mouths full of earth, bodies buried upright beneath fields. He woke gasping. Ruth stared at him through the dark, eyes wide. "You dream its memories," she whispered. "It wants you to see." Morning brought fog dense enough to drown in. They moved slowly, directionless, until the sound of voices stopped them cold. Through the mist, the faint shape of tents, flags flapping without breeze. British soldiers, their red coats dull and faded, their movements strangely slow. Elian stepped forward, pistol lowered in cautious greeting. No reply. The soldiers stared. Blank eyes turned skyward, mouths slack. Their necks bore dark bruises, as though they'd been hanged and cut down again. The boy touched one, cold as clay. Ruth backed away, breath sharp and panicked. It has been here. It left them standing. From deeper in the mist, footsteps approached. A single figure emerged, one of Waya's Tuscarora warriors, alone and unarmed, his face pale, haunted, marked by violence. He fell to his knees before them, speaking in halting French. He took them all. Waya called it forth, but it chose him instead. It wears him now like skin. It hunts. He reached for Ruth's arm, gripping it desperately. "You bear its mark. You must end it." Ruth tore away, shaking. "How?" The warrior's eyes darkened. "With blood. Yours, the boy's. It wants sacrifice, or it will devour the world." Elian's pistol lifted sharply. "Enough." The warrior closed his eyes. "Kill me, please." Elian hesitated. The boy did not. He stepped forward calmly, drew his knife, and sank it swiftly into the warrior's chest. Blood pooled quietly. He watched the life fade, felt nothing. Ruth looked at him, horrified. Elian's gaze hardened, wary now. "He asked," the boy said simply. They moved on, Ruth trailing behind, eyes haunted, fingers digging at her scar. Elian watched the boy, understanding slowly dawning. Innocence was gone. The boy had begun the quiet way of men, the path his father had walked before him. Night came. No stars appeared. Darkness pressed tight against their skin like soil. Ruth sat alone, eyes fixed upward, whispering apologies to a God she no longer believed heard her. Elian kept distance. The boy stared into the dark, feeling watched. A voice murmured from shadows. "West, always west, where graves grow into forests and the dead wake to watch." The boy turned, saw nothing, only darkness breathing slow and quiet. He did not sleep. Act 4, The Land Without Prayer. They came upon the fort at dusk. It stood crooked in the trees. Walls sagged. The gate leaned inward like it had been beaten open too many times and never fixed. The wind ran through it and no one stopped it. They passed under the arch and entered. Men sat against walls with their backs to the sun. Some carried muskets. Most just watched. A child with no shoes threw rocks at a dog too thin to move. A woman sat under a broken bell tower whispering to her own hand. This was Fort Gilead. No one asked them why they came. No one cared. A man in a red coat told them where to sleep. It was a hole in the ground with canvas over it. They went in without speaking. The boy lay on the floor and felt the cold in his teeth. At dawn, they met the man who ran the place. Sergeant Cutter. He had a voice like dry stone and a face that hadn't moved in years. He asked them nothing, told them nothing. You'll keep to yourselves. We've no patience for ghosts. Elian asked if they could help. Cutter smiled like a man who'd seen the ocean. Everyone helps, or they don't last long. They were allowed to stay. Elian joined the wall patrols. The boy was sent into the woods with a man named Josias, a freedman who carried a rifle like it was the last good thing in the world. Josias didn't speak the first 3 days. Then he started humming. Old songs, half tunes. He had a woman in the fort, Belle. Her hair was tied with a cloth the color of dry blood. She didn't smile much. She didn't have to. Their daughter Morel followed Ruth around like a bird with no song left in it. The boy watched her sit under the eaves of the burned chapel, teaching Morel how to count bones. The soldiers did not pray in Fort Gilead. The priest had died. No one buried him. They left him sitting at the altar, his head bent back like he'd heard something too loud to forget. Major Volkenrod read scripture aloud from a book with pages missing. Dutch. Thin hands. Eyes like a man who had stopped asking God for answers and now only waited for instructions. This land must be burned before it can be saved. One night, Josias came back with blood on his arm. Cut from shoulder to elbow. Tuscarora on the ridge, he said, watching. Volkenrod looked at Cutter. Then we strike while their eyes are still open. They left before dawn. They left the fort as the sky bruised purple. 112. Soldiers, farmhands with blades, runaways looking for blood. The boy among them, Elian, Josias. They carried torches wrapped in pitch and powder in their packs. No songs, no prayers. We walk quiet, Cutter said. Let the fire speak. The woods grew narrow. Branches snapped like bones. Birds did not stir. They crossed a creek where a rope hung from a limb and no one looked at it long. At the ridge, they stopped. Below, the village slept. The smoke from cook fires curled upward in straight lines. Dogs barked once, then silence. Cutter raised his hand. The first shots cracked like thunder rolling out of an old god's mouth. Warriors ran from their huts, half-dressed, painted for another day. Muskets fired again. Then again, 12 Tuscarora stood their ground. They fell with arrows notched, some screaming, some not. Warriors rose with bows in hand. The first musket volley tore them down. The second killed the ones crawling. The third was for those who cried. The boy didn't fire. He just watched the sky turn red. Cutter gave the word. Burn it. Men ran laughing into the village with torches. Huts went up in seconds. Women cried. Children clung to posts. Elian cut down a man who couldn't run fast enough and didn't look behind him after. McGill took a blade through the stomach and laughed like he'd just been kissed. Ain't that just like home, he said, and died with mud in his teeth. Cutter told the men to finish it. They did, quietly. They set the old ones in rows and shot them from behind. They cut the throats of the children so the smoke wouldn't be the only thing rising. They found 2 warriors hiding beneath the canoe and lit it on fire with them inside. One man tried to stop it. He was knocked down and left behind. The boy walked past a hut and saw a child dead with its eyes open. He kept walking. Josias caught up with him in the dark. His hands were shaking. We came for defense, he said. The boy didn't answer. That ain't what this is. The boy looked at the fire. Then we came for the truth. They returned to Fort Gilead with black hands and blacker hearts. No cheers. No flags. Ruth saw the blood on the boy's shirt and said nothing. She just held the girl tighter and looked at the gate like she wished it would close behind her. That night, Josias didn't sleep. Elian sharpened his knife. Cutter cleaned his saber with a cloth already soaked. The boy stood outside the church with the burned priest and listened to the fire crackle like bones underfoot. And out past the tree line, something watched. It made no sound. It did not sleep. It did not blink, and it would not forget. Here's the passage in clean text only, exactly as written. The fire had gone out, but its smoke stayed in the walls. They didn't speak of what happened, not aloud, not in the light. The boy sat beside Josias in the dark. The only sound was the pop of damp wood and the faint breathing of men pretending to sleep. Josias held the flask in both hands, stared into the coals like they owed him something. Belle always wanted a garden, he said. Said she'd grow yams and roses side by side. Said she'd make something that don't belong together sit quiet anyway. The boy said nothing. I told her I'd build the fence. Never did. He drank, passed the flask. I ain't afraid of death, Josiah said, but I'd rather my daughter know what my voice sounded like than what I died for. The boy took the flask and didn't drink. Ruth sat in the chapel basin with her sleeves rolled. She scrubbed her hands until the skin came red. The water had turned to milk and steam. She didn't look up. Sister Annalise stood at the altar, chalking Latin on the wood. She hadn't looked at anyone in days. Her eyes were set on something that hadn't happened yet. You carry death in your chest, she said. That child, she'll bear it next. Ruth kept scrubbing. What will you do when the fire reaches the child? Ruth paused. Her hands bled at the knuckles. Hide her where even God won't find her. Elian sat cross-legged beside the gate, sharpening a knife with slow strokes, metal on stone, over and over. The boy stood nearby, watching the trees. We did what we had to, Elian said, but you didn't even flinch. The boy didn't answer. You're quieter than the corpses, the boy turned. His face didn't change. They got nothing left to say. Elian stopped sharpening, looked at the boy for a long time, then went back to the blade. Morel sat on the chapel steps with a bird bone in her hand, scratching circles into the dust. Ruth had gone to rest. The fort was quiet, like something was holding its breath. The boy passed her, rifle in hand. She didn't look up. Are you the one who kills monsters? He stopped, looked at her. No. She looked up, her eyes too old for her face. Then why did they run from you? He didn't answer, just kept walking.